From Washington, D.C., welcome to this week's Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today, as always, with my co-hosts, Trade Martin and Bob Marks.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show, with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
This week's Alumni Show is brought to you by Bill Haughton, insuring standardbreds and farms for over 40 years. Bill knows the ins and outs of equine insurance. Make sure your equine investments are protected. Call or text Bill at 954-655-5547. That's 954-655-5547. Call Bill now.
Freddie, tell us about the yearlings at the sales by Huntington Farms.
Huntington Farms, selling their 2021 yearlings at the Lexington Select Sale, October 5th through the 9th, and the Harrisburg Sale, November 8th through the 12th. For more information, call 859-987-3983, Huntington Farms, or email huntingtonfarm@cs.com. Joining us today is Robbie Siegelman, a driver trainer who also works with our veterans using horses for equine therapy. Robbie, welcome on the Harness Racing Alumni Show.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
We're glad to have you, Robbie. Robbie, fill us in on the work that you're doing with our veterans and the horses.
Okay, well, I've been doing volunteer work with veterans for probably the last 10 years or so. It started at a place called Horseability, where veterans would come out from the Northport Veterans Hospital once a week, and they would ride the horses, and they needed somebody, for the guys that didn't want to ride, to drive. So enter Robbie Siegelman, who happened to live 10 minutes away, and I love helping people out through horses, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me. And since then, we have recently just started a great program at a facility called Warrior Ranch Foundation in Calverton, New York. And this is a place strictly for military veterans and for first responders. Because of, especially with COVID now, the first responders have PTSD and need some equine therapy just like the veterans do.
Yeah. Now, Robbie, do you receive any support from the Veterans Administration at all?
There are a lot of grants out there. They're tough to get. I leave that to the executive directors at these facilities. I am a 100% hands-on guy. I don't run the operation, but I do run the driving program, and I just tell them, whenever you want me to come out and give driving lessons, and they've got me very busy right now. I will say the Meadowlands really stepped up recently. I spoke to Jason Sedamore, and in about 5 minutes, he said, Robbie, whatever you need, I'd love to back this. Jason and Mr. Gural, they have been big supporters of veterans programs for a while. We actually, going back a few years, entertained a group of veterans at the Meadowlands, at Yonkers, and also at Belmont Park. What I like to do as part of the program is teach the guys how to drive a horse. They all love it. And then at the end of the program, set it up with the Meadowlands or Yonkers and let them lead a couple of post parades. And Meadowlands and Yonkers both did that, and then we led the post parade 3 or 4 races, and then the tracks wined and dined them, and they were really great nights. And when I went to Jason with the most recent program, he said, Robbie, whatever you guys need. And the program is going great right now, and I really look forward to bringing the guys to the racetrack.
Great. Robbie, how do you find your horses?
They actually are mostly retired standardbreds. The first one that I used was one that Barry Rubenstein owned. It was a Cheyenne horse. And the full sister made about $600,000, and this one made $20. So we donated her really quick. But I'll tell you a funny story most recently, and this is what happens when you send a bunch of veterans to pick out a horse. So I like the Standardbred Retirement Foundation. My owners have been supporters of them for years, and they have well over 400 horses, and most of them are push-button, two-finger race horses that make great driving horses and riding horses. And when you send a veterans group out there, what did they come back with but a rescue from a kill pen, all scarred up and scratched up, too big for any of my equipment, and with one eye.
Oh,
and that's what these guys relate to. And it turns out to be possibly the best therapy horse you could have, because these guys really relate to this beat-up horse, and he's doing fantastic.
Huh, great. Well, how do you find the vets to fill the program?
Well, the program at Horseability was through the Northport Veterans Hospital, but Warrior Ranch Foundation, they have a constant flow of much younger vets and first responders also. And like I said, I'm happy to go to these organizations. They'll do some of the legwork as far as bringing the vets in. And these are all young kids. And it's another reason why I really relate to it. These kids are my kids' ages. And they come back from Afghanistan, Iraq. Most of these younger kids have all seen combat. And they have trouble in transition back to society. A lot of trouble. And they don't like the word therapy. So if you tell them we want you to see a therapist at the Veterans Hospital, they don't like it. But if you say, hey, we have an equine program for you guys, and you guys can come work on the farm, take care of horses, they don't look at it like therapy. They learn about the horses, and it just runs itself after that. It's amazing. There's a couple of vets. The one that comes to mind is a good friend now, Paul Martinez. He did 7 tours in Afghanistan. He was actually an Army Ranger, and he told me a few times horses has saved his life. That's a pretty big statement. So if I can offer them what I know about horses and teach them and my side of it, and I'm helping to save their life, I mean, it's awesome. And I really enjoy it. So for me, it's easy. It's a no-brainer. And you're helping these kids.
Now, how many horses do you have in your program now? And
not too many. We don't have too many, and the reason we don't have that many is because of the cost factor. You know, it probably costs them about $10,000 a year just to keep the horse. So we try to keep the numbers down depending on how many vets are in the program and how many days a week that we go. So keep in mind, I'm a volunteer, and I just sort of retired. So I was the driving program. I am the driving program. So at Horseability, we had 2 driving horses, and at Warrior Ranch, they have only 1 driving horse, and they have a couple of riding horses and a couple of miniature horses, because they do other programs too. They do natural horsemanship, and the vets just love grooming.
Yeah. Now, I know that I had connected you with the American Horse Council and Julie Broadway, and I know that she helped you get into the New York City Trail to Zero. Tell us a little bit about that, and are you going to be participating in the next one?
Definitely, 100%. It was one of the coolest events I probably was ever involved with. One statistic that's shocking, and most people probably won't believe it when I say it, but 22 veterans commit suicide a day. I mean, that's a staggering number. Google it. It'll come up. It's true, and it's horrible. We lose more veterans now by suicide than by actual service. It's horrible. So Trail to Zero is an event in New York City that's run by a group called Bravehearts out of Illinois. And Paul Martinez, who I mentioned to you, thanks to your connection, I was able to get him to actually ride in the event. And I believe it's October 16th or 17th this year. They try to do it as close to 9/11 as they can. And last year we rode 22 miles in New York City on horseback. It was 4 mounted police departments and 13 military vets. So we had about 25, 30 horses all together. We went from Central Park to Ground Zero and back, and just handing out literature, explaining what the event was about. And it was really an amazing event. If somebody wants to look it up online, Trail to Zero, and you don't live far from New York, it's an amazing event to come and just check it out. And it's totally to bring attention to the 22 vets a day.
Yeah, I think they did 3 other cities too, Dallas, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. But in Washington, D.C., they wouldn't let the horses on in D.C., and they had to cancel it.
Exactly. They did have a problem, and I think they also tried Houston last year. But I think New York and Chicago are the most successful ones. And I'm telling you, to see these horses go past places like Radio City Music Hall and Trump Tower, and we stopped in Times Square for pictures, and it's a really cool event. And we also entertained the vets when they were in town. We took them to Belmont Park for a day at the races. A good friend of mine, Michael Doug, who's a big owner at Belmont Park, he got us in, and the track wined and dined us, and they got to meet the jockeys and the drivers, the riders, and the trainers. And again, the vets just love being around the animals.
Yeah, and again, isn't part of your program to also teach them how to handle horses and how to possibly get jobs in the equine industry, as farm managers and so forth like that?
Yes, yes and no. It's something that I really would like to get going if I had a few more connections. With all the connections I have, with 40 years in harness racing, there's so many jobs available that I'd love to get some of these kids that are in transition to introduce them. You don't even have to touch a horse. You could work for a feed company. You could work for a shipping company. You could work at the racetrack. You could work at a breeding farm. And recently I got a vet that was really lost a job working with the blacksmith. So I think there's so much more that we could do, and it's one of the things I really would like to get going. I am only one person, but I'm really enthused about all this. And, again, I just like to help these kids out.
And how can our audience help? Is there any way that they can help?
Well, I think eventually we could actually have these programs going at a lot of different sites at some of these other farms. It's really easy to get a standardbred and a 2-seater cart. Tony Olanya recently donated a 2-seater cart to us. John Daly donated a harness. The SRF donated a horse, and away we go. We have a program. So I'd like to see it at different harness places throughout the country. Financial is probably the best support somebody else could give other than their own time. Could always use volunteers, but we could always use financial help because, again, it costs a lot of money to keep the horses.
How can they contact you?
Well, on your website, my phone number is listed. If somebody really wants to get involved, they could get a hold of me either on Facebook at Siegelman Stables. They could get my cell phone number, I guess, if they're serious enough, off of your website under veterans.
Okay, and that's at ustrots.com.
Yes. And they could also call Warrior Ranch Foundation direct.
Okay. Hey,
Bob.
Probably
always best to try to get a hold of me.
Okay. Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
Not really, but I think this has been a magnificent presentation. Robbie, if you ever need any of my verbal expertise, I'll be happy to write anything you need, and give you some publicity. Okay, I think it's a phenomenal cause.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is actually see the industry just get a little bit more behind it, whether it's the
We
USDA.
should. I agree. We should. We should, definitely.
100%.
Robbie, I agree. We should all be behind this.
And it's so easy to do. I mean, we have the horses. I know if I went to a farm and I could walk into almost any barn and say, listen, I'm sending you 2 veterans twice a month. Could you teach them to jog? No one's going to say no. And maybe you should take my email. If somebody's interested, they could email me.
We'll make sure that we publish it.
Yeah, so my email is ROB as in boy 3308 at AOL.com.
Okay, we'll make sure that gets out there with the show.
We'll publish it, no question about it.
If you're buying or selling your home, Joe Rico is your go-to guy. Joe has been representing buyers and sellers on Long Island for 30 years. He is an expert in all types of sales. Don't settle for average. Call or text Joe Rico today at 516-524-4870. That's Joe Rico at 516-524-4870.
Fred, give everyone Joe's email address.
That's Joe Rico, C21 at yahoo.com. Crawford Farms, breeding the best to the best so that you can race the best. The Crawford Farms consignment will be selling at the Lexington Selected Yearling Sale on October 5th through the 9th. For more information, please visit Crawford Farms' website at crawfordfarms.com. Robbie, thank you so much for being on the show. You're a great guest, and it was very informative.
Well, my pleasure, guys. Anytime.
That's a wrap for this week's broadcast of the Harness Racing Alumni Show. On behalf of Trade, Bob, and myself, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show